the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security under George W. Bush. Thanks for joining us again. H.R. McMaster seems to be saying this is all very normal. We have back channels all the time. This is not normal. This is Jared Kushner supposedly and allegedly setting up pre-inauguration a separate out of the White House channel to Russia. In your mind as a security professional, what's concerning about this?
Well, I think if we just take a step back for a second and talk about the Russian investigation overall, you know, we have the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee.
A couple of committees are looking at it.
We now have a special counsel, you know, headed by Director Mueller. You know, and so I think there's a lot of eyes that are looking at this issue. I think every day there's a little bit of trickle of information in terms of what happened during the campaign or may not have happened during the transition. You know, transitions are very fluid. Things that, you know, that go on with, you know, a small staff and there's lots of information coming at them. You know, I think you could argue the Trump campaign probably wasn't prepared to necessarily take on the transition following the election. So I think, you know, maybe there were mistakes made. I don't think we know all the facts yet. I think we want to just, you know, take a step back and just kind of see what comes out. I think we're living in an interesting time where there's, you know, not a 24-hour news cycle, but a 24-second news cycle. So, you know, I think we need to be careful on both sides of the aisle, not to convict right away, but until we have all the information in a 24-second.
What would be the concern, though? What would be the concern about Jared Kushner having his own line of communication to the Russians?
Well, again, I don't know if this was a Jared Kushner direct line to, you know, the ambassador. I think we're taking the ambassador's word for it, you know, in terms of what exactly the conversation was. And you know what? We've had the red phone for a long time. I think it was Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. They used to have a red phone that they used to use that we used to really be excited about. So I think, you know, let's just take it one step at a time.
It was interesting to see this headline because it did seem for some time that Kushner and Ivanka sort of stayed away from some of the troubling and concerning headlines, if you will. So certainly a lot of eyes on this and people, maybe, I don't know about surprised to hear the name come up, but certainly turned a lot of heads. But what I want to talk to you about is the response to the Manchester terror attack and language in general. As a security expert, the president came out and said, we're not going to call them monsters. We're going to call these terrorists losers, right? And when I first heard that, I thought, you know, the president, it just reminded me of the president's reliance on language, right? I mean, when you look at what he's trying to do at home, the executive order on immigration is not implemented, right? There haven't been, the wall is not built, but the language that the president used has affected border crossing attempts. Then he comes out in response to this terrorist attack. Again, it's this focus on this language that he uses. So I interviewed Dr. Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President this week. I asked him about this choice of language. I want you to listen to this and then just respond to this in general.
Sure.
I think if you see what happened in Riyadh, how the president spoke in front of the representatives of more than 50 Arab and Muslim nations, he was very clear that this is an evil threat and that they must drive these people out of their places of worship, out of their communities, is exactly what he said.
So what's your take on the idea that the president isn't always getting his legislation through, but he certainly is affecting, I think, maybe change and reaction just by the choice of words and the style that he has at the pulpit or at the podium?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, George Bush used the term evildoers, and I think that was one that caught the world off guard at the time following 9/11 attacks and used a pretty strong language. I think President Obama, you know, didn't want to use the word terrorist and had a different language describing certain attacks. And obviously, President Trump is swinging more towards the George W. Bush direction in terms of stronger language. He's decided to use, you know, losers and other terms like that. Right. I mean, the reality is...
Does it work?
Well, I think the reality is that, you know, he's at a meeting with NATO leaders. He's letting them know the United States has a strong commitment to dealing with some of these threats, and that he's going to be aggressive. I don't think there's any question that Donald Trump is aggressive.
At the same time, though, nobody's ever going to confuse Donald Trump with the great orators of the presidency. And when he calls these people losers, they are losers. But we also have to stay close with our friends, too. What happened with England and Great Britain this week is disturbing. They're not going to share intelligence with us anymore because they don't think we can be trusted with it.
Well, they stepped that back. That same day they
how damaging is it to our relations when we go over to places like NATO, when we deal with our allies, our closest one ever in Great Britain, and we stick our fingers in their eyes that they don't want to work with us anymore? How damaging is that?
Well, you know, leaks, unfortunately, have become a normal course of business when it comes to the government, not only in the U.S., but, you know, across the globe. And I think that, you know, President Obama had many leaks in his administration, called for many investigations. Donald Trump's now dealing with them.
Never had this.
We're not sure at which level.
You
never had
this. Share the intelligence with us after President Trump made that statement and put that information out to call for the Department of Justice. So you're right, we never had this, but...
James, real quick, because we're running out of time. If you look at the totality of this trip, are we in a better position with our allies right now, or we've done damage?
You know, I think that we're in a good position. I think anytime the president, travels, overseas and makes it a point to visit our allies first, I think that's a good sign, and I think he's done a good job on this trip in terms of expressing his agenda. He might not always agree with it, but in terms of his agenda, I think he's done what he needs to do.
We always agree with having you come in and join us. James Norton, we appreciate you taking the time on your Sunday to join us.